because of the next storm coming in. You know, we're going to talk about business process and decision management, but really what we're talking about is the work you do. It's just the work you do and how we can make that better. And I'll give you an example. When I first started working, I actually have a college mate here. When I was right out of college, and I was on the 12-year plan. So we weren't supposed to graduate the same year, but we did. In between then, I actually worked at the state of New York as a temp in Albany, in the Twin Towers in Albany. And I worked for the ECAP program, the Energy Crisis Assistance Program. There was myself, about 100 people in a big room, and we would go over to a table and we would take a stack of folders and we'd go back to our desk. And on the inside of that folder was the application that the person had filled out requesting assistance for fuel oil. That was the energy crisis, right? They could get up to $500 worth of assistance, which was a lot back then. We're talking 79, 80, right? It was a lot. So our job on the outside of that folder was a receipt. That was their claim. And our job was to subtract the receipt value from what was left on the application, write it down, and if they could pay it, you put it on one pile, and if not, you put it on the exception pile. That was the process. That was our step, our task, as one step of a claims process. There had been an application process. Somebody had reviewed their eligibility and said, yes, these people can get this much money. So now the state had a liability to them. There were values flowing through there. There was work flowing through. Nobody knew, though, in that room full of 100 people, how much work we were doing. At the end of the week, they could total things up, but they didn't have any handle on how long it took for any particular folder, any particular claim. They didn't know if things were getting dropped, if folders were getting missed. They didn't know if the math was right. They didn't know if I was good at it or you were better at it. If the hard claims were going to you or to me. No visibility. I didn't know who to ask for help with something. I didn't have a problem with the math, okay? Don't look at me like that. But you understand what I'm saying? It was work we did back then. No systems, no mainframe in that part of the work. There were applications, obviously, the accounting systems that things got entered into to pay the checks, right? That was it. And the systems for putting the citizens into the database, that was it. I mean, that was very simple. A lot of manual work, very few systems. Then we moved on through the decades, right, and we built lots of systems over the last 30 some odd years. We built lots of systems, but they still have gaps. We still send spreadsheets around, don't we? Right? What we're going to talk about is simply the state of the art in automating that stuff. It's that simple. But it's different than what we were doing 5 years ago. I was on a call last night, and one of my teams needed to understand how to speak to a quality team. How do our tools line up with these people that are doing Kaizen? And the answer came back from our quality specialist, a guy I know in Minnesota who's one of the state inspectors up there, and he helps us sell on a worldwide team. Kaizen is a lean practice, not a Six Sigma practice. And here's how they go about using that, and here's how our tools work. And it's just about improving the way we do work. That's what today's about. It's how we do work better. And why, right? And then Joe is going to show us. So what we've done, first of all, this is a workshop. So the less I speak, the more you talk, the more we interact, the more you get out of it, right? I have the first period. We broke up the morning into it's a hockey game since we don't have the NHL. This is it, all right? So the first period is me. We've dropped the puck, and I'm gonna talk about this and explain it. The second period is Joe, and he's gonna show it. The third period is you. It's whatever you need at that point, whatever you want. There's a presentation on best practices that I can do, that I typically do, and that we can talk through that in 15 minutes, or we can have a conversation about it. Joe has some other demos, some deeper things that we could go into. We can take questions. So we're calling an audible at 11 o'clock. Okay? It's about you guys getting the most out of it. And about me finding my clicker. First, I want to hear from a customer. Is anybody here from MasterCard? There was somebody good. And I saw you guys look at each other when he said that, and you're like, what's MasterCard doing? You know this guy?
MasterCard is actually not issuing any credit cards. We are connecting about 1.7 billion consumers out there to a network of about 22,000 merchants out there. We do about 43,000 transactions almost every minute on that network. The network can handle as much as 14 billion instructions every second. How do you match up the speed at which the market expects innovation with the stability that everybody is expecting from this network that connects everybody around the globe? And that's when we started our discussion with IBM. What we came up with is exactly that platform that I described with. We've established a technology layer with its roots into our network. And it's got veins feeding it from our data warehouses, human areas, and other areas. So what we've done is we've created a layer on which we can position new and innovative products. We can bring them to market much faster, but we know that the foundation of how the technology interacts with our network is safe, is secure, and is stable. One of the products that we end up with was the WebSphere platform and the message broker, and particularly also the iLog rules engine. Now we can provide thought leadership in the industry. We can do new things much faster. The speed to market and the financial implications of that to the business cases are so much more better. It gives us more product efficiencies. A lot of our existing products we can actually augment through this capability and make them better. And then, on top of that, it allows us to foster innovation. So out of this platform, we see an array of new products seeing the light in a very short time frame. And we are already looking at bringing up 2 products onto this platform. One is our business rules management tool, and another one is what we call transaction blocking. We can, within hours, deploy rules and logic onto this network. Let's say, for instance, there's a regulatory rule that we need to put in place. Any transactions that meets this criteria needs to be blocked on the transaction network. In the past, those efforts would have taken us at least 2 weeks. Thanks to this IBM platform, we can do this within a matter of hours, and sometimes even faster as that. What we got out of this is a very, very powerful platform that allows us to do quite a lot and to serve our issuers and our acquirers better, which translate into a better consumer experience for the person swiping his or her card at one of the point of sales.
So when I first heard him speak, and it was in Las Vegas at our major event that we have every year called Impact around this technology, the technology from IBM where you run applications, you connect applications, and you build them with process management and decision management software. I heard him speak, and I heard his accent, and I wondered where he was from, and then I heard him say more better, and I knew he was from the South. That's definitely a Southern saying. But what did he say? He said, the market demands innovation. It demands it. The regulators, the customers, right? They demand innovation. You have to make changes in your business fast. And it's a backlog. When you have a regulatory change that takes months, are you meeting the deadline? Are you going to get fined? Are you going to cover the risk that was just identified? If you can do it in hours. And by the way, why does it take hours? You're going to make sure you're doing it right. You can't just press a button. Right? And then he talked about product innovation on top of that. New capabilities. And what does a credit card company do? They don't issue credit cards, they manage transactions. So a credit card check, it's like one step in a process. One step. Right? So those folders, automated. Right? So what does it take to get there? We're going to walk through a little bit of that. First of all, some motivation. McKinsey study. Improving business processes came out. Improving business process effectiveness came out as the number one priority for executives, but I'm going to drill down into that. Improving effectiveness, efficiency, cost, IT cost. But look at these columns. Non-IT executives, the business, right? The business says, I need to improve my effectiveness. IT says, we need to reduce cost. Little disconnect there. Why is that? Shouldn't IT reflect the business priorities? Yes, but we get handed a budget, right? When the business needs to make a change, they change the budget. We see this over and over again. Very interesting, right? Some examples where this has worked, where we made changes like this. Horizon Healthcare, down the road, right? Quickly speeding up payments, speeding up enrollments, looking at this technology as a platform to run their business, and going full speed down the road as fast as they can on making changes to both process and decisions in an automated manner. On the western side of the state, we've got Health Now doing the same thing. How do we bring people into our organization, the enrollment process, that application? How do we bring them in faster? The sooner we bring people into our organization, the sooner we can do business with them. If you're government, the sooner you can serve them. Right? The more efficiently you do it, the less cost. The more effectively you do it, you get the right people sooner into your organization. The city of Madrid, response times. Do you guys remember what this was about? What motivated this? The bombing in Madrid. They had emergency services, obviously, but what they needed was a pattern to be able to detect, make decisions, and act quickly across the city. And they put that together. Being able to detect what's happening, make decisions, and act. That's a pattern. Here's a commercial version of that same pattern in telco. So Globe has prepaid cell phones like TracFone, another customer of ours. And they needed to do, from a campaign management, customer retention or churn in this business is a big issue, one of their big issues. Prepaid phones, you know how they make their money? It's not on the phone. Float? They might make some on the use of the money. It's more on the minutes. It's on the minutes. Yeah, thanks. You guys, you see what he did? Participation, right? It's a workshop, right? So it's about the minutes. Sure. The question is, what do I mean by the minutes? They give you a phone for a price, and it includes some minutes. The price is less than the cost of the phone. The way they make money is when you buy more minutes. Topping off is what they call it. How do they get you to top off that phone? You could just buy another one. Yes? They expire. Yeah. That's one way, but you could buy another phone. They have to catch you. They have to detect an interaction with you, their customer. They have to figure out who you are, what market segment you're a part of, what promotion applies to you, and then offer it to you while you're making that transaction. You're buying some minutes, I'll give you a discount if you buy more. You're nearing the expiration, I'm going to offer you a discount, promotion. So it's promotion, discounting, right? Detect, decide, and act. They make more money. They run their business. They're more effective. Right? Does that make sense? Here's the stick. That's the carrot. Here's the stick. Take a look at that. 10 of the Global 2000 will be toppled by process defects, doing things wrong. All right. It's probably true as we look backwards, look at who's not here, who was here. All right. How we do the work matters. And when it's manual, we just don't know. Here's part of the problem. You know those systems that we build? Guess what? For every developer, this is a study that we did. For every developer, there's about 5 supporting people in IT, supporting on average 240 people on the business side. Guess which side of that slide is growing? We have more work than we can do, right? But we've seen this pattern before, this problem pattern. We've seen it before. You remember back, well, not those of you in New Jersey, but the rest of us. You remember when self-service gas pumps came out? Right? Why? Cut costs. Right? And now there's higher capabilities. You pay. You don't even have to go inside when it works. All right? So, first of all, self-service. Give these people some of the work to do. In the MasterCard example, it's the business making changes, saying what the policy should be, and IT handling just the mechanics of it, not the logic, right? But in order to do that, you also need this engagement. When we build business process management systems so that you get a task list, if I was sitting in that room today working on those applications, on those claims, most of it would be straight through processing, first of all, right? I would handle the exceptions. We're working on an example of this with several healthcare payers. Today, even today, they process millions of claims, and only the exceptions go to a person. But they go to a person, one customer on Greenbar report that says we have this many of these type of claims with these problems. And then the supervisors assign the work out. Now, the people don't go to a folder, they go to the system again, right? But today with the BPM system, we use rules. We're showing them how we can do this, and several payers are looking at this because they still are working in this way. So they're saying, okay, let the exceptions go through the rule system. The rule system triages which type of issue they have. Some of those can be mediated automatically. And then I know, by the way, I know what your expertise is on this side of the room, and I know what capabilities you have, so I can assign the right exceptions to the right people. Excuse me, I now create a process for each one of those. I assign it to your task list as a group. As you take them, I see them go through. I can monitor it. I have visibility into it. And now the supervisors, when they're on their way into work, instead of dreading what the report looks like on Greenbar, they get a text. And it says, this many exceptions overnight, this type, we assigned this many. And these are the few you have to handle when you go in. So the work starts, it's much more effective. It's automating, right? It's simply removing the waste in a lean approach with automation. You also, if you're doing Six Sigma, you're looking at the variability. Because when people do things in a manual manner, how many of you know if you call a business and you get the right person, you get your way, and if you get the wrong person, you don't? That's variability. That's what Six Sigma people look for. How do we remove it? We automate. And we can't do it with the staff we have today. There's just too much work coming at us, too many regulations, too many market changes, economy changes, right? And then we're going global at the same time. So engagement, bringing the business into working with higher level capability tools so that we can work with the business. That's what Joe's going to show. How do you do that? How do you draw a picture of what the business wants and press play and have it work? That's what we're going to show you. So here's some examples. This is a pricing analyst making changes to pricing and promotions. Here we have a customs officer changing rules around what gets inspected, when, and how. And a doctor changing a patient flow process. Business people making changes to the way the systems work and help them do their job to be more effective. This is process innovation. It takes a few things. It takes some imperatives, some key things. Number one is that visibility. We've got to see what the problems are. We've got to be able to work together to collaborate on how to fix it. I should be giving this talk to Congress, shouldn't I? Yeah, good luck. Thanks. I don't think they'd get it. Although they heard a lot of it last night. Heard a lot of it from both sides saying, all right, let's work together. So hopefully they will collaborate. We can give them some tools. Visibility, collaboration, and then when you press the button, you've got to have governance. If we're going to let the business change the pricing, the promotions, the way the system works, well, if they change it the wrong way, what happens? They could have everything become a manual exception. They change the rules the wrong way. Everything shuts down your business, right? And if they change it the other way to the extreme, they could make everything automated and shut down the systems. We have to have governance. We have to understand, is that change worth it? When we make that change, does it match the regulation? If I improve the price, does it really change my profit? If I change the promotion, does it really move all the product off the shelf? We have to go through a governance process that has a little bit of sanity check in it. And then, guess what? It has to be simple. We're going to have business people use the system, do this. It has to be in English. It has to be in pictures, right? Big pictures. Nobody's laughing on that one. It's got to be true. So let's talk a little bit about who the players are. And a lot of times we work from the business side. We take that requirements document. I was talking about one this morning. Joe had a beautiful picture of Caribbean. And I remember one time, I'm going to tell the story real quick. I was writing one of those proverbial 300-page requirements documents, and it was stressful. I had a mean manager, I had a deadline, and I got it done, and I stapled it, and I hurt my hand when I stapled it, and I dropped it, and I just closed my eyes, and I pictured myself in the Caribbean. I didn't try to. I didn't think about it. I was just there, rum and coke in hand. It was a true story. Honest to God, this happened. It was bizarre. It was just that much stress. But the requirements documents, they're just that. They're everything we can do. And the business analysts are really doing everything they can as a community to understand how to do this better. Any BAs in here that are involved in that? I mean, they're doing a lot, right? To understand process, to understand decisions, to understand that it's not a requirement unless it matches a business objective. That's really hard to do. Ask the business, what is the business objective? Well, they go, that's my requirement. Why do you need to know? It's hard to get to that point. So they're really spending a lot of time trying to understand what's happening here. Those requirements documents were really system specs. Even before the design stage, they really said what I need the system to do, not what I need to do. We try to get around that. On the IT side, we're really trying to make some inroads there too. So I'll give you an example how these people are playing together. We've got one customer we're working with, and it's an insurer. They're doing a major system implementation. We're talking a 3-year implementation of a major, essentially an ERP for insurance. And I've got 2 examples like that. One's a 5-year. One's a 5-year implementation. They're essentially going to take resources from the changes they were making. That's 6 people and supporting the 240. They're taking a lot of resources from a whole set of lines, all of the commercial lines, because the personal lines need help. And they're doing an implementation there. But in this one case, this other one is just a 3-year implementation. Taking a lot of resources. We're working with enterprise architecture, and they're saying we're doing SOA. We're integrating everything. We know how to integrate to this new. It's actually they're not only creating a new ERP system, but they're creating it as a joint venture with another company and the manufacturer. We know how to integrate to them. But we also know there are processes that go across, and we want to have business process management across that to handle the exceptions, to handle the work that happens around the system and in between the systems. Across that boundary between the joint venture and us, we need BPM. At the same time, there's a guy that works, there's the chief operating officer, the vice president of business improvement, and then this program manager. He says, we've got 100 project managers. He says, I need BPM. I know I need BPM. I've got 60 use cases on the business side. He justified exploring it based on this one use case. 100 project managers. They have a long gating process for a business project. First of all, does it touch financial systems? Goes through a longer path. Second of all, this, that, and the other things. And executives have to be involved. And it could be an advertising project. They're rolling out new promotions. It could be a new line of business in insurance, right? We've especially in healthcare, where it's going from groups to individuals, there's a lot of changes in what the lines are. So he said these processes, these gating processes, executives have to be involved. They have to approve things, and guess what? They don't want to be involved. So there's this delegation process where they formally delegate people. Did you know how much time we waste every month just on project managers chasing signatures? He justified the project and going forward to explore it. Now he's gone to the operating council, and they've got people fighting for their use case to be a priority on the business side. So we put the guy on the business side together with the people on the enterprise architecture side and brought them together. And we're going forward working with them on this. But this is just an example. Just an example of some of the starting points and the things that people are trying to improve. They can't even go into a new line. We had an insurer up in Hartford tell us that there's a new way to do business. This is about 4 years ago. About 4 years ago. It's a success story now. But basically, back then, all of the insurance companies were looking at ways, especially on the healthcare side, of working with banks so that not only could you pay out of your pocket and pay through your insurance, but you could pay through other accounts, right? So it's kind of normal now. We understand that. We might not all be doing it. But back then, they were all trying to figure out how to get into this business. And this insurer said to us, we can't even announce to the industry we're going to do this until we have confidence that IT can deliver systems to do it. So it took 2 years for them to come through and do it. There's lots of starting points, but we really have to go across this. We have to be able to communicate. We have to understand what's going on. Today, I mean, Gartner has been forecasting for a decade that I've seen, what percent of IT budgets are spent on maintenance versus new development. When I started looking at that, it was like 68%. Now it's 80. 80% of our budgets are spent on maintenance. So how do you deliver these new systems? It goes back to self-service, right? So a couple more starting points. We've got customers that we're working on in every one of these areas. New product development, claims, healthcare, new channels, mobile. Mobile's an amazing new channel. Have you all heard of the consumerization of IT? Bring your own device? I'll tell you, mobile is about that, first of all, right? We all want to interact the way we want to interact. I have apps on my iPad and on my Android phone. Not one of those apps is as functional as the website they're supposed to emulate. Not one. They have a better interaction for the limited functionality, but they do not have the full functionality. Does anybody have an example of an app that's as good or as fully functional as the website? Yes? Yeah, a lot of regulation around that. So, in your example was healthcare, where you might be handling personal information, right? And to store it down on the app, on a device, violates HIPAA laws, for instance. So yeah, there's a lot of limits to it. But one of the other limits is we put the functionality in the web channel. It's not in the middle in the organization, so we can get to it from everywhere. We put the functionality in the middle application so you can get to it from the call center, and we put it in the web channel. So there's regulatory issues, there's resource issues, and then there's where did we put the logic, and how do we emulate that? And of course, then you know what the life cycle is for an app, a device app. 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah, I was in one of our largest customer. I was in a boardroom with some of the executives from IBM and from this company. Our largest customer, and we are their largest customer. And I'm in this boardroom, and they're talking about this. They're talking about their application development methodology and how they can improve it. They're talking about using business process management because simply in a testing phase, you've got some of these larger projects, you've got 1,500 developers, you've probably got 30 manual processes. You're issuing a request for a test plan for a component, one component, and that goes through program management on this side, and then it goes offshore, and it goes through their process, and it comes back for review, and you have no visibility into the timeline. Large projects like that, a lot of ineffectiveness, right? And they started talking about their development process, and then they moved to the device app, the devices, the apps on the devices, and that life cycle. They started realizing, and these companies don't have one. They don't have one app. They have hundreds and thousands of apps for devices that are being built. and have that 4 to 6 week life cycle? How do you manage that? Right? So there's a lot of work here. A lot of things are changing, right? I mean, chaos and entropy is increasing. You know, it's a reference for you, Mark. But there's a lot of things going on here. So yeah, look at all this. We're, as consumers and as citizens, we're demanding improvements in all of these areas. And as people that care about it, because you're in this room, because you came to BPMI and looked at what offerings they had and what you could learn, you cared about this, you came here. I mean, look at these starting points. Travel and transportation. For you, pricing, promotion, loyalty. A car sitting on a lot at a rental agency is a it's a product that can spoil. What's the word I'm looking for? Perishable. Yeah. Your rental day will perish. Yeah. A ship sailing, a room in a ship that's not booked, is a perishable product. Yeah. So you have to be able to fill it. There are revenue managers that sit there and they're responsible for making money, for getting a yield up, or utilization, right? We're not missing out on a day, and getting the revenue up. How do they do that? I just booked a cruise. Did I pay full price? No. This is New York, guys. You know about not paying full price, right? Come on. But why do they offer us discounts? It's perishable, right? The tomatoes are going to be rotten tomorrow. Sell them. It's that simple. But how do you do that when you have a lot of tomatoes? Yeah, Mark. Make sauce. As long as you use fresh garlic. Okay? Starting points. Think about the starting points in your business. Think about it in your projects. Think about where we could make things more effective. We can make those improvements. And then, this is something that's very important. We see this pattern with customers all the time. Start with a project, and they move on to a program. This is a new way of doing things. So we have to train people. We have to get used to it. In-house, we have to figure it out. Not only do I want to understand what you're talking about and why we're doing it and how we're doing it, what it does, but I want to feel it, I want to touch it, right? There's the old saying, tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, but let me and I understand. You have to go through that phase. I used to be able to know how to, I used to know how to sign that. All I remember now is forget. I don't know, that statement I just said, all I remember is I forget. But moving from one area to the other and being able to use this capability, we don't want to build applications anymore. We want a platform that reflects the business because the organizational silos change. The organizations in healthcare payers that grew up around group insurance are now, they need to change to individual. Our world is changing in that area. In banking, things are changing. We need to be able to leverage what we're doing. Simple decisions like eligibility, fraud, those type of decisions are universal. They're enterprise-wide. Another example, a little different. Give me a cursor.
High. So we typically run around 95% occupancy.
The number of patients we're seeing is growing. The acuity of patients is growing, quite frankly. They're sicker when they come. They need more attention. They need more care in the community after they leave the hospital.
We had overcrowding, patients in the hallway, high occupancy rates that we felt led to a poorer patient experience and probably less quality outcomes. Our vision statement was to be an academic center that was tops in the country, leading in research and education, And it was glaringly obvious at that time that we didn't have a patient focus in our vision.
When the patients are not being able to flow through the hospital effectively, and you could argue the patient is not receiving the level of care we'd like to deliver by making sure that there's a space available for them at the appropriate level, at the appropriate time.
Physicians and other healthcare providers are knowledge workers. We need to push them up the value chain so they're not doing low-value activity like calling for consults or trying to negotiate an admission for a patient on another service with another physician. And they should really be focused on patient care and their clinical delivery of care.
And over the course of a few months with a lot of engagement, we all agreed on a vision that we would aspire to provide each and every patient with the world-class care, exceptional service, and compassion that we would want for a loved one.
So what we're doing is we're following the patient and we're modeling the processes that's relevant for them. And that's what we're attempting to do here, is to put process orchestration, process models in place so that literally from a monitor, you can see the characteristics of the system. You can see that the flow in the ED is too fast to be taken up in the admitting units in the inpatient wards. How can you influence that?
I think introducing business process management into healthcare is going to change the world, frankly. Being able to drive out the inefficiencies, to free up clinicians to do the things they ought to be doing for the patients, it helps to provide better care.
The concept is that we fill in using technology and tools the white space between the systems so that we can put markers in to know movement of a patient, critical events that need notification, bring in data where it's required proactively. And using the IBM tool sets, Lombardi, BlueWorks Live, and these other event engines, business rules engines, what we're doing is we're drawing what people do naturally out of their heads, looking at best practices, trying to meld those together to be best practice, and then model it and harden it so that it's predictable and usable. Process innovation is being able to introduce enablers like technology, like information, like other things into a process and make it more powerful. Increase the capacity of a process and flexibility of a process.
Either going to spend more time focusing on the right things and less time focusing on the mechanics, the bureaucracy, the paperwork, and other things. I'm not spending time chasing information. I'm spending time dealing directly with the patients. The future of the auto hospital, from my point of view, is going to involve leveraging this technology across the entire organization. Obviously, we're starting small to begin with, but I can easily see it's going to spread further and further and further.
What I would like to see, and I will retire a happy man, when every patient, every time, walks out of this hospital having been treated and says, they treated me like a loved one, and I've had a very good outcome. That's what this is all about.
So, first of all, the guy wearing the Patriots hat, that I had to Google that. That is the Ottawa Patriots, not New England, so it's okay. Okay. A lot of things in that video. Every time I watch it, I see more. Overcapacity. Doctors not focusing on the right things. How could that be? You know what that is? That's every one of us working very hard on what we think is the right thing. But when you step back, you look at the outcomes, and our priorities aren't aligned with what the outcomes are. Today in healthcare, we're moving towards outcome-based healthcare. Providers, accountable care organizations are doing this. They're getting paid for the outcome, not the procedure. It's very small, starting as a pilot program, but things are changing. So how did they do that? He talked about engagement. They had to figure out, they had to have visibility into the flows, what was happening. They had to understand the process. You know, in hospitals today, as I understand this case study here, and I'll tell you in a second what they did on stage when they came and presented. And by the way, anybody here wants to end up in a video or on stage at Impact, you know, think of that starting point, that project, and what would make it that much of a difference that you would be satisfied enough if you could make this kind of change, that you would stand up at a conference and talk about that kind of project. That's what they did. All right? So they actually really had a lot of work to get to this point. And he also talked about starting small. going from the first project and moving and becoming enterprise-wide. A lot of things he talked about in there. On stage, the screen opened, and there were these doctors in these big white coats, right? And he talked about how when he would go talk to a patient, all they had was a clipboard, right? Back to the folders, right? And all he knew was what was in there. He didn't have the pictures. So the most important thing to us on the receiving end of healthcare is this consultation. Joe, I'm going to cut off your leg. It just says so here, right? So you're right or left, I'm not sure. But no, I'm serious. To be serious, that's an exaggeration, but they don't have all the information, and we don't get it. We don't get that information to even feel comfortable with the decision or to be a part of the decision process, forget it. So these doctors on stage said, and he goes into his lab coat and he pulls out his iPad. Now, first of all, what was cool is they sew pockets into their lab coats now to hold the iPads. And on the iPad, instead of the chart, they can show you. So he's speaking on one screen, 8,000 of us in the room, right, in this conference, and up on the other screen we see his iPad. And it'll show you, here's the x-ray, here's the sonogram, here's the MRI, here's the lab results. This is what we think, and this is what I'm thinking about doing. And you're part of that process now. Now, to me as a patient, that's important. But to him as a doctor, he was really passionate about it. But then the killer came in. He goes, while I'm talking to you, I could get paged to go to the emergency department. Because in the old days, it'd be 15, 20 minutes before they even knew if I was coming. Right? Now, I get the thing on my iPad, I look at those results, what's going on there with that patient, and I can either tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes, or I refer it immediately to somebody else. So the problem of throughput and capacity and effectiveness handled with mobile apps, and the other half of the story of consumerization is making the back-end systems work the way we need them to for that interaction. That's the other half of it. So when you look at business process management, decision management, and automating that, and you look at the mobile devices and what apps are doing to change our world, there's two parts to that story. One is getting the app that's functional, and the other is getting the back-end systems to have the information. You saw the picture, how they were mapping out the process today. Before that, they did it with a whiteboard. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I write in a line on a whiteboard, I erase the line below it. But they typically will draw out on a whiteboard what the flow is for this patient. Right? Now they have it mapped out. So very effective. And we're going to show you how they mapped it out. How many people are still sending around spreadsheets? Come on. You know, I did say this was going to be interactive. You can at least raise your hand, right? But that's the state of the art. That's where we're at. We have core applications. And by the way, we have these kids in the business, not in IT, who are building these other systems, right? These shadow systems. You know how I know that? I was one. Okay? Starting with DBase 3, moving on to Clipper, and then ending up at Microsoft Access. Today they do it in SharePoint. All right? They build these shadow systems. Why? Because there's holes. There's work that these people do that don't have an application that meets this functionality. There's work they do that is right in line with the functionality of an application, but the application doesn't cover it. So there's spreadsheets and there's SharePoint. That's what we do today. Right? But just like the folders, I don't know who's doing the right work. What's in those spreadsheets? Pricing, promotions, important things. Who's on the fraud list, right? Things like that. That's important enterprise information. And just like back in the 90s, or the 80s actually, when Lotus 123 became, it's kind of about the same year the first IRMA board leaked data from the mainframe. Lotus 123 became one of the biggest, most used programming languages. How scary that was. I was working in nuclear power. We had to verify and validate every system to federal regulations, and yet we had people keeping track of change requests to engineering systems in spreadsheets. No validation. How do we know they didn't lose change requests that were safety related? We didn't. Same thing with financial systems. And if it's not an important system, like safety related, human safety related, health related, or financial related, it's affecting your business, those process defects. Losing customers, not onboarding customers, or losing revenue, or accepting the wrong loans. You know, loan decisions, they seem like such a horrible thing when you're on our end as a consumer. To the business, they could make a couple bucks on interest if they approve the right person, and they could lose the whole principle if they approve the wrong person. So it's really more catching the downside than catching the upside, right? You don't want to do that in a spreadsheet. Right? You need to get to a point where you create a little order out of the chaos. You work together, collaborate on what should it be. You're engaged with IT. You've got a little bit of self-service. So you can define it yourself like that. Right? This is the holy grail that we're searching for. But you do it one small piece at a time. What are the decisions that we make, and how can we best make them? Thinking consciously, as you go through the process of thinking what are the decisions we make, sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes it's not clear that we make them. A lot of times we have the decisions tied up in the process, but they're not really, it's not really a fork in the process. It's really one decision, a determination of eligibility, a fraud determination, right? This is the portfolio that we're going to show you. There's 4 pieces to it. How we do this, I'm going to move, I have no idea what the time is. 10:05, good, I'm only a little bit long. BlueWorks Live, this is what the doctors were using when they drew the process out, and Joe's going to show you that. It's a cloud offering, it's very simple to use. Business people use this. There's one large very large financial institution. Their risk organization inside their credit card unit is using this. The 200 people, first line and second line managers, are mapping out their process. Now when you map out a process and you see something red, what do you think that is? Your turn. Critical. Yeah. Could be bad. In this case, it's the risk group, so it's a control point. So you can use it in a lot of different ways. We want to automate the process. We use the business process manager. The server runs the process center is where we all collaborate. You want to automate the decision, pricing, promotions, loyalty, fraud. Use the operational decision manager, right? The server runs it. The decision center is where we all collaborate. So it's simple. And then, if you want to monitor it, now each one of these pieces have monitoring, but you want to monitor end-to-end. End-to-end being, I get orders from Siebel, a quote to an order happens in Siebel, then I go to fulfillment in SAP, I don't know what my SAP process is, then I go to my distribution centers, right, my warehouse management systems. I need deep end-to-end monitoring. Business Monitor plugs in. By the way, in SAP, we have a very strong story where all of this plugs into every piece you do, from blueprinting to remodeling the whole system. So we're going to show you these pieces today. And I'm almost on time to do that. And a quick point, basically, Greg, you said we did a unique thing. We bought these applications. But I'm going to submit to you folks, and I'll ask you what you think, because you really haven't given me the break I needed here with your feedback. So I think that what IBM does is just what you do. We look at what we need, we look at what we have, and we make a decision. There's a gap. Do we buy it or build it? And when we bought iLog for its J-rules and other components, we bought Lombardi for its BPM, those were decisions. I came from an acquisition 11 years ago. And Steve Mills has this chart that starts up in 2002 with my company, and it keeps going, right? It keeps going. But in the meantime, we built things and we've replatformed them. So the reason I'm talking about that on this slide is in 2011, in the first half, we put together the process engines. And in 2011, in the second half, we put together all the decision management pieces, including the complex business event processing. In 2012, in the first half, we revamped all the user interfaces. And now we have a roadmap going forward. And what are we focused on? Come on. What are the 3 hottest things in technology today? Mobile, cloud, one other one. We just had an election. What was burning up the atmosphere? Social. Why would IBM be investing in mobile, social, and cloud? We'll show you some of it. All right. Why? Because new trends for a reason. You know what, though? When I talked about those starting points, when I talk about our portfolio and our investments, no business does anything without looking for a return, customer satisfaction, improving effectiveness, right? You guys shouldn't think of this stuff here as a way to do something trendy. Look for a problem to solve. So cloud solves a lot of infrastructure, a lot of deployment issues. Mobile solves a lot of interaction issues, customer satisfaction, and literally more effective transactions with our customers, right? We use mobile for more effective transactions with the businesses we deal with. Social, simply having more visibility, more information, right? We make investments because there are returns. IBM is the biggest social user, by the way, right now, biggest user of social technologies. So I'm going to stop there. But I really do want to hear from you folks. Give me some questions. Anybody? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So you work at Hertz and you work in strategic initiatives, right? And your question is, what works well? What should you be focusing on? I should have brought the mic over. It would have worked better for me. So your question is, operationally in the field, how do I improve operations? Where do I look for improvements? And from my supplier, you almost have a sell side and a buy side yourself, right? From your supplier being technology and finance and legal too, right? How do I get things quicker from them? And the answer, if we go back to that starting point slide, is that you have to focus on the business problem and the business opportunity. The key word in your organization is strategic. So this is just a technology. The tools are a technology. Business process management and decision management are just technologies. Now, business process management is a discipline. Decision management is a discipline. We have experts in understanding how to do that. We have experts in understanding how to analyze, design, deploy, and monitor, and optimize, and change both business process and decision management. But you're the experts in your business, every one of you. So this is very cooperative. The engagement part that the doctor showed, we had to go to the doctors to find out what to change. Unfortunately, you're the doctor. Now I'm your patient too, right? We discussed this earlier. We talked about my rental experience. I'm one of the top tiers. I'm not a diamond yet, and nobody will tell me how to become diamond. That could be part of it, right? I don't know how to become diamond, but it's that engagement, right? So Greg did a survey. He used the social and the cloud capabilities available today to understand, given New York's predicament, should we hold this? You collect information. Where to apply it? Any one that you come up with. And we talked about some of the examples. In travel and transportation, really big around pricing, promotions. Simply creating a new promotion takes how many steps and how many departments? It's painful? Yeah. So we know from the campaign management scenario that I talked about before that detect, decide, and act, the technology can help you detect, decide, and act. decide what segment is this customer in. So analytics give you segments. Everybody's doing that already. We're already segmenting our customers, segmenting our employees. But that thought might have gone. Oh, creating the promotions. You decide, okay, given the segment, what promotion? But because it's so painful, some companies are keeping only a dozen or 100 promotions, depending on the scale of your company. But if you automate that process, you remove the waste, and you actually have visibility into how many promotions do we have, where are the gaps, what do we need, and who did I assign to create a promotion, who's reviewing it. We've had companies go from 100 to 1,000 promotions because you have a lot more than 12 segments of customers. Right. So there's an area of effectiveness that we've seen. Thank you for the question. Yes, sir. Let's try the microphone. Well, we are recording. Greg?
There's a disclaimer on the form. I gotta go back. Very tiny, tiny print.
We're going to be anonymous, though.
You talk about the promotions and things like that, and it's sort of situational about what's going on and things like that. I find that sometimes it takes so long to implement that stuff that it's not even relevant anymore. So do you have any tips on sort of how to streamline that? Or
when you say implement it, are you talking about the technical part or the business part?
The business part.
So as an example, what's the flow? What are the 5 steps or 4 steps?
Well, I mean, she mentioned the rental car promotion, and maybe with a certain situation going on, you want to promote rentals or something like that for a certain situation.
Right.
But the situation is going to go away, and it's going to take so long for you to implement that it's no longer relevant.
Yes, when it's in code. So I'll give you a couple examples. We've got a travel and transportation company that we're working with on promotions. And if I just leave this with you, it might not growl at me. So they have a set of screens that they go to. They're green screens. It's table-driven logic. You guys remember table-driven logic? We tried to make systems more flexible, take things out of code, put them in tables. A couple of problems with that. They were able to do the promotions on the ship sailings that they had already in the system. They had tables to add ships, but now they were adding lines, they were adding markets, and they didn't have the flexibility. They had to change the tables. We worked with them on this, and so it was going to take man-years to make changes so they could add these things. All right. As we looked at the table-driven logic, and we did an archaeological dig through all the code, all the if-then statements, which is really the worst way to determine your business logic, we came out with about 40,000 rules. As we sat and talked to the business about what they did, well, there's loyalty programs, there's seasons. You start thinking of the business categories and how they do it, there's only 2,000 rules. And they were generic and applied to everything. So that's part of implementing the technology. Then the English comes in. An example of using that English to make the change, many insurance companies have problems making rate changes. One of them, a large one out in the Midwest that I've dealt with a lot, it takes over 8 weeks to make a rate change because of all the code. Right? Now and there's one up in Hartford. It went from 8 months to 8 days. And the 8 days is because of governance. Test it, simulate it, make sure that if we make that change that you're talking about and we ran last year's data through, it would make that difference that you're talking about. So that's an example. The business change goes from whatever it takes IT to do, plus the review and approval of business, to just what it takes for the review and approval of business. I don't know if I answered the question. Good. Thank you. And, yes, sir. Here you go.
We're an international bank, and we operate almost in every location differently. So the big question is really, how first do you standardize it, and does a system like this actually help you to standardize it? Because everyone is fighting back, and of course, their local way is the best way.
Yes. So we sometimes work with a big decision management consultant. He coined the phrase, James Taylor, not the singer. He coined the phrase of decision management. And he talks about one global process and 3,000 local exceptions. And that's kind of what you're talking about. IBM went through that transformation. We had thousands of processes in our supply chain. We now have one process, because the process doesn't change as much as those exceptions change, as much as the determinations, the pricing, and things like that. The decisions change much more frequently based on business policy, which change based on customer and market conditions or geography, right, and customs and rules. So it's quite possible to have one process and all the local exceptions handled by the rules. How do you get there, I think, is your question, right? How do you get there? You have to start, you have to, I hate to use this phrase, but you have to think globally and act locally. You really do. We have had customers do it because one region did it. They had autonomy. They bought the software. They brought the discipline in, and they looked at it from a quality perspective, from a discipline, and they made changes, and then it grew. And we've also had customers, like a very large financial institution up in the northeast of Canada, and they made a change. They were actually speaking at our BPM event out in Napa last year, and he talked about commercial onboarding, essentially account opening. Simply onboarding the customer. A commercial used to take a minimum of 30 days, typically 3 months in this case, and they did it top down. He owned the process. So it was the exception to the rule that we talk about, to start with a project, learn, and grow. And he did it top down. Right? And that was great for him. If you have the autonomy, you can do it top down. Now, the way you do that is you have to bring people together. We're working with a couple of large SIs that are looking at how do they globally assign work. Well, you have a center in 3 parts of the world that's staffed. You have people remotely. You're taking in business from different parts of the world. Let's say it's tax auditing, right? Something they do a lot of. Well, it's like those folders. Who can I give this folder to? What are the qualifications, right? But they're looking top down because it's a global problem. In your case, it's still a global problem. Your geography is a little smaller, right? But yeah. We work with a lot of banks that are fighting this problem, and sometimes they'll pick one product line as the starting point. Sometimes they'll pick one geography, depending on how the systems and the people are arranged. Any other questions now? Okay, those of you that, yes, Mark, wait.
Yeah, it's building up that last question. Building up that last question, there's a lot of different ways you can handle it. And one other instance with the bank I was involved in was there's no right answer. There's no right process. You don't have to say, I'm taking the one in New York and I'm discounting the others. You can take a simple tool like BlueWorks Live and map the processes with the different locations and then take best practices from each of those different locations to put into your global process. But building on that, and the question I have for George here is, if I heard you correctly, in terms of getting started, you want to start small and have success. You start with your strategic priorities, and then you take the highest return on investment. That makes perfect sense, but you want to get started and you want to start small. On the people side, who do you need to get involved initially, and how do you assign the different roles and explain the project to them?
One of the keys to success is having that first project staffed the right way. And yesterday, we were at a pharmaceutical company. I'm gonna answer this one. Then I'm gonna let everybody take a break because I know. Hold the rest of your questions. Okay, all the arms that are up. So the question about how do you staff it, who gets involved, kind of touches on the strategic question, and where do you start? It kind of pulls it all together. Thanks, Mark. So we put up a chart. One of the charts I use in the best habits when I go through that in detail. This was a chart based from one of our client partners, he owns our services business. And these are the people that can come in and do a discovery workshop with you to really pull it. If you got 3 examples, 3 projects you think are good candidates and you really want to do this to improve your business, they'll do a discovery workshop, and we just go to the whiteboard. We just go to the whiteboard and work through it. Technology, infrastructure, architecture, then the roadmap, what do we need to do? And it always gets down to that question of what people. Well, what people do you need in a discovery workshop? And then we do a quick win pilot. We'll do a 90-day project and get something production ready. It's one area, you know, scope it out the right way. But it always comes down to what resources you need for those, who needs to be there to talk about it? Who do you need to talk about to figure out what candidate projects? And then who's involved in the project itself? So we're in this pharmaceutical company down in Raleigh, a lot of CRO organizations, clinical research organizations. They do, you know, they take the chemicals that we say are potential drugs, and they test them, right? In the third phase, I think it is, where they test on people. That's what the CROs do. They start up projects. They then have these principal investigators, which, by the way, are typically young people who have a lot of turnover. They're traveling around to different doctors. They have to sign up the doctors and the clinics to then sign up people into the program. It's almost a pyramid scheme, right? But it's a very important business because that's where our drugs come from to make our life better. So there's a lot of processes. There's a lot of communication. So who gets involved? We put up this slide. You need a process analyst, a business analyst type that understands process, understands how to look at something and say, oh, that's a step, that's a step, that's a step. Here's your exception paths. Let's analyze, let's figure out what it is. Let's look at where variation comes from, Six Sigma perspective. Look at where there's waste in that process. So they're doing process analysis. But we also need experts that can say, wait a minute, those 3 steps together, that's one decision. So you need somebody who understands decisions to really understand it. Now, you don't need to do both together because we have people starting with simply, I need to do loyalty program. I need to segment and promote to my customers. So they're working with the decision management software alone and that discipline. But you need somebody who understands the discipline and that aspect of the business. Then you need somebody who understands how to design it and show people in the tool, like Joe's going to do. All right. You need the typical project managers. But you also need 2 key people. Who's the executive sponsor? On that chart that I showed you with the organization, the business, and that insurance company I told you about, the chief operating officer is our sponsor. The program manager went through the vice president of business improvement and got the chief operating officer to sponsor it to the operating council. It doesn't get much higher than that. In the claims case where I talked about the exception handling of claims, where they're coming down from the mainframe, they get a green bar printout, it's the chief executive officer in that case. Those are really exceptions of business sponsors, right? But an executive sponsor, somebody has to sponsor the budget, and you'll get budget. Right? It goes back to that slide of McKinsey's study. You will get the budget if you have an executive sponsor. But then the other person, the other key role is the business owner. It's not the executive sponsor. Who does he turn to when that process doesn't work? Who does he turn to when the fraud decisions are going badly? The business owner, the person that's vested, the person that gets incented and paid based on how it works. Very critical. Do we always get those people? No. Projects succeed, but that's the best, right? So then the next question, and I hear these questions all the time, is how do I sell to those people? I see the problem in my organization. I see that we could make an improvement. How do I tell them? Well, it's a business case, right? You need to show them where the problem is so that they see it, not from your perspective. It's not a technology problem. It's a dollars and cents problem. This is business. Right? We've helped a lot of people. We do business cases for customers. We have a team of people. They don't sell. They're financial people. They use your numbers. They sit there and interview you and build your business case, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So that's another example. But those are key people. I hope I answered your question. Thank you. Does anybody want to take a break? Oh, sure. Now you guys participate. Let's take 10 minutes. And then, do you want to see it? Good. Yep, Joe's up.
Let me lower this a little bit. So can folks keep... I've been with IBM, it'll be 10 years in January. And I was actually a professional hire from PepsiCo. I've been doing BPM as a discipline for about 13 years. In fact, my very first process that I documented was in PowerPoint. And in my cubicle, I would print out these slides, and I have them all around my cubicle documenting the process. Eventually, we settled upon an early BPM tool called IBM MQ Workflow. Has anybody heard of MQ Workflow at all? Okay. Well, I ended up learning MQ Workflow, and the consultant who taught me that piece of software was so impressed with my BPM skills that eventually I was recruited to come to IBM a couple years later. So, and the rest is history. So I've been doing BPM for quite some time. How many folks here, I know a couple people raised their hands as far as being a business analyst. Are folks more on development side, project management side, development at all? All right, business analysts, we saw with a couple, project management. Okay, so BPM is really the discipline itself is supposed to bring the goal is to bring together the various disciplines. Because early on, with my first BPM project with the MQ Workflow, we kind of followed this traditional waterfall approach where and George alluded to his experience with this 300-page requirements document. We went through months and months of gathering those requirements, and then I helped out on the requirements gathering, but I also helped develop the application itself. So then we spent a year developing the application, then we tested it, brought it before our end users and so forth. As we will see here in a moment, at least IBM's approach to BPM kind of short circuits all of that. So you don't have to spend months gathering requirements. You gather some requirements, you start building out your application, then you test it all in one loop, and you kind of repeat it over and over and over again until you get the application that the end users would like to see, right? Because they get to see that value very much more quickly than they would in a traditional waterfall sense. So what I'm going to take you through today, as George kind of showed you in that slide before, we had our cloud offering, the BlueWorks Live. This is what I've got here, which allows you to do process discovery in the cloud. So you can actually go out and do process discovery in a web browser. From there, you can take the process. Once you've discovered your process, you can then take the process and bring it into your, what we call IBM BPM, Business Process Management, and begin to actually implement that process. Right? You're not required to start a BlueWorks Live. You can actually create your process application within IBM BPM. But BlueWorks Live is a way for technical, non-technical, a wide range of people to kind of collaborate in the cloud to do process discovery. To your point about having all of these 3,000 processes or different local, you can capture that here and kind of discover your common processes and perhaps create those as services potentially. And then we'll go ahead and we'll implement that process in IBM BPM. We'll test it out. We'll run a few iterations, or we call playbacks. And then I'll show you kind of the end result, the end user experience of BPM, kind of the front end for BPM, and some other aspects for BPM, such as decision management. I'll show you the end user experience for decision management, as well as monitoring of those applications. Now I'm going to combine sitting down and kind of running the demo here. I'm going to stand up as well because I also like to point to things on the screen as opposed to sitting here at my chair. All right, so what we have here is a web browser, and I've pointed my web browser to blueworkslive.com. Right, process made simple. As you can see, there is a 30-day free trial, so you can just sign up right away and start doing your process discovery. We do have live demos here, usually once a week. I think it's every Tuesday at noon, but you can send an email via this link and you'll get the notification on where to attend that live demo. In addition, after this, if you're really interested and want to see more, I can certainly, come over to your place of business or over the web, and we can do a more in-depth demo. In addition, we do offer what is called a proof of technology, which allows you to get your hands on not only BlueWorks Live, but IBM BPM and decision management. So you're actually working with the tool. I'll spend about an hour talking about the product, and then you'll spend the rest of the day doing labs, getting hands-on. So you get a real feel for the product itself. All right, so let me log in. So this being a service, the model for kind of payment for is a subscription service. It's not a traditional licensing. So it's $50 per editor per month. So it's quite inexpensive. $600 per year per user. One of the nice things about BlueWorks Live being this cloud service is the fact that you get these multiple releases per year. Right? There's no software to install or upgrade. IBM comes out with releases every couple of months or so. It's a little hard to see here, but you got a February release, an April release. There's no set release. It's really a matter of when do we get things ready for public use. So there's nothing for you to do. It's simply log in and you get those extra features. So I'm actually a member of a number of different accounts. Let me select Sales account. Now the thing is, when you sign on with your company ID, your information, your corporate information, is completely separate, right? So there's multi-tenancy within BlueWorks Live. So I can't see your data, and you can't see my data. So your data is safe. So I log in, and I come to my particular space. Now you can set your landing page. I prefer to set my landing page to my space. This space is simply a collection of processes that I've developed over time. What we see on the left-hand side here is an activity stream. This kind of shows what goes on within my space here. I imported this onboarding process, and I let others access. I granted others access to this space, and I can. Some of my colleagues have made additions and changes to the process itself. Sure. Well, it looks like my colleague Jeff Lynch made 20 changes to a particular process we worked on together for a particular customer. My other colleague Prasad made some changes. He also made some comments on a particular activity within a process, and so forth. So you kind of get to see what's been going on here. Again, to that social aspect that George alluded to in his what you talked about earlier. All right, so you have some couple of options here. You can create a new process, or you can import a process. Many times, a number of our customers utilize Visio as their process documentation tool. And Visio is okay, but it's essentially a drawing tool, right? You're just drawing a lot of shapes, and you're connecting those shapes. The challenge that you have with Visio, and I see it all the time, right, you've got this one screen, and you've got all the information kind of thrown in there. And I've seen some real bird's nests, and it's kind of hard to decipher. So the solution to that is, well, you've got multiple pages, and it's kind of you're flipping through pages, and you're trying to correlate, well, what's on page 2 with what's on page 1. And what you'll see here, all that information is logically organized. So you see the process, you can drill into a particular task and see those attributes of that task. So you're not flipping pages, right? It's beyond, it's not just a drawing, it's an actual process. So you have the option of importing a Visio diagram. You also have, some vendors also generate what we call business process modeling notation, BPMN. It's the emerging standard of BPM. There were a number of standards 5-6 years ago, and it appears BPMN is the emerging standard. So if you've had another vendor where you generate that BPMN, you can certainly import that in here as well. This is relatively new, XPDL, the XML process definition language, again, another standard that some vendors use, and we can also import that as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a very simple process. And if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt. Right, as George mentioned, this is supposed to be an interactive session. All right, so I'm going to create a new process blueprint. We'll call it Workshop Demo. And what we get to see here now is a discovery map. And there's two main views, two main visual views that you'll see. Discovery map, and I think what most people are more familiar with is a process diagram. And I always say this, I've been doing BPM for so long that I kind of prefer thinking in a process diagram, and we'll get to see that in a moment. But many people use this discovery map, particularly early on in the process, because you don't necessarily know the actual sequence of the process. You don't want to necessarily get bogged down to those types of details. You just want to kind of throw up, oh, here's an activity, and so forth. What you also see here are milestones. You can think of milestones as phases within your process. What constitutes kind of this milestone one and this phase where you reach a particular point in the process, you've reached a particular milestone. There's no really hard and fast rule of what constitutes a milestone. It's what you make of it. I've developed processes with a single milestone, and I've developed processes with 10 milestones. It's really up to you. And it's really, as part of that discovery process, you get a feel for what those are. And what you can then do is begin to start adding activities. Now, normally, this would be an interactive session, right? We'd be sitting down, I perhaps would be facilitating this, and we'd be talking through the process. Alternatively, I'd be working on my own, developing this, and other folks could be logged in, looking at this at the same time, right? So you can drag and drop activities from one milestone to another. Alternatively, you can realize at one point, well, this is not really an activity, this is really a milestone. So that changes very quickly as well. It's very, very flexible. So at this point, we're not really concerned about the actual sequence of activities. We just want to get those down. Okay. Now, beyond this, what kind of gets beyond, say, the Visio paradigm is the ability to add details around this particular activity. Right? Let's see if I can zoom in a bit here. There we go. Right. Right. We'll see details in a moment. You can follow this activity, certain different types, whether it's a human task, a decision task, and you can, right, whether it's a decision task, a user task, or a system task, you can denote that. You can also link to a process. So if you created a process, and I'll show an example of that in a little while, you can actually link to it. So that activity is not really an activity, it's really a marker for a sub-process. You can also attach a color to it. These colors have no meaning other than what you make of it. It's just a way of differentiating the different things. So we'll make it something really colorful here. All right, so let's look at some details. So we can then begin to add details about this particular activity, such as the participant. And this is important as we get to the process diagram. That participant will become a swim lane in the process diagram. You can add any business owners associated with this activity, experts, systems, cycle time. And this is what you make of it, right? There's no universal glossary that it has to be a particular business owner. It's what you make of it. As you enter this information in, this information becomes part of that glossary, of your glossary. So when another person comes in and creates a process, let's create a participant. We'll call it, I'll call it agent. Might be, right? And I start typing in AGE, and all of a sudden I get this whole list of kind of matching. And this is what all my other tech sellers have input in, and this becomes part of our vocabulary. You probably could do that and should do that, but a lot of our tech sellers are kind of doing this ad hoc. But ideally, you can actually do that. Let me show you an example quickly. Right. As you enter this in, it automatically adds to the vocabulary. Mm-hmm. Or you can come into here, once we get it up the screen up, you can actually edit in manually as well. But we find that it's easier for people to simply just start working their processes and have that information added. Oh, there we go. All right. So, right, these are all the users that are associated with this particular account. vocabulary. File management. Yeah, it's in here somewhere. But basically, you come to your administration console, and you'll see that vocabulary there. Go back. Right. The two main ones that you have are editors and contributors. And editors, as I mentioned, are $50 per month per user, and they can create and update these processes. And a contributor can log in, view the processes, but only make comments on the process.
We just added in the last release, you were talking about multiple releases, 6 to 8 weeks, viewers, which are $2 in blocks of 1,000.
Right. So as far as software is concerned, it's as low as you can go. I mean, it really doesn't get much cheaper than that. All right. So let's go back to our discovery map here. Right. So we go into our details. I'll call it agent. All right. You can begin to add all this other type of information: experts, systems, cycle times, cost. Now, this is really up to you, how much information you put in. Right? The more information you put in, the more information you'll get out, as we'll see a little bit later. Now, the next question I usually get from customers is, well, okay, this is great, but is there a way to add our own data, right, our own attributes? And the answer is yes. For each customer account, your own account, you can add up to 5 alphanumeric and 5 numeric custom attributes. All right, so you can add all of these particular attributes. You can also then document any challenges that you may have with a particular activity. All right, takes too long. And as you can see, as I start typing, it goes to the vocabulary and pulls up other problems that other people may have documented with their other processes. You can also document the severity of the problem, low, medium, or high, and the frequency of low, medium, or high, another problem, and so forth. Policies are a relatively new feature. If you have a corporate policy that's been standardized and you want to utilize that here, you can certainly attach it or associate it with this particular activity. Right? And policy is just that. It's just a set of guidelines that have been documented that you can upload to BlueWorks Live and associate with a particular process or task. Documentation. Documentation allows you to add rich text. You can add in links. You can add in photographs and so forth here. And again, this is important when you generate the documentation. So the more information you put in here, the more information that you'll get out later. And I'll show you an example of that. In addition, you can upload any file that you need to attach to a particular activity. One question I did get from a customer: are there any size limits or number of files? And I talked to development, and they're not aware of any. So give it a go and try to break it. No. But generally speaking, your average question. That's the potential, or the question was, is there versioning with attachments? Right. With the attachments themselves, there isn't a versioning process. There is a way to version the process itself, and I'll discuss that in a little bit. But any sort of,
well, they think behind this is a file system, not a content management system.
Right.
Now, the way to do that, to get what you asked about, which is version documents tied to the process, would be to use linking, not copying.
Right. Right. So in the documentation portion, you probably want to put a link in and then have that where you have a version document. Here, you're actually uploading that file to BlueWorks Live. And then finally, comments. So as I mentioned, if you're a contributor, you can view the details, the problems, the policies, and so forth, but you only have access to actually make add additional comments here. Okay, so we've done some documenting in our discovery map. Now we want to change this to more of a process diagram. I think most folks are kind of aware. What we'll do is we'll switch over to our process diagram. And the first time it says, okay, it's going to create a process diagram based upon the information that you put in here. Obviously, there's not a whole lot of detail. It's just going to make its best effort of creating a process diagram. Create the diagram. And what's really nice is that you can begin to add details to this diagram and make changes. Those changes will be reflected back in the discovery map. Okay, so I'm going to add decision nodes and other activities. When we switch back to our discovery map, those decision nodes are not going to appear in the discovery map because that's not the place for them. The place for them is here, that additional detail. So the two diagrams will remain synchronized. So we can add another activity here. Actually, add a decision node. Add another activity. Right. And then we'll go back to our discovery map. And as we'll see that those two activities were added where they were. And additionally, you can add more activities here. And you go back to our process diagram.
Essentially, you're just hitting enter and tab.
Right.
Type in that outline.
Mm-hmm. And this is really meant for, really basic information. It's not the fact that, the fact that it's simple doesn't mean that, it's not important. In fact, we went to a accounting firm, I think one of the big four, I guess, that's left. And we did about a 2-3 hour demo of BlueWorks Live. And they were very excited what they saw, what I'm showing you here, that they went out and bought a bunch of licenses or subscriptions for it. Then we offered to actually come down for an entire day and kind of teach them how to use BlueWorks Live. And after what I showed them, and after they just kind of played around with it for a couple of hours, they said, no thanks, we're okay. And if we have any questions, we'll email Joe. In fact, I got an email from them this week about a question. So it's that easy, as I just showed you, for non-technical people kind of do this process discovery.
Joe, let me ask you a question. You guys see how simple this is? How do you do a 2-hour demo to anybody? You used the last hour for interaction. Did you?
Yeah, it was highly interactive because it wasn't just showing them beat BlueWorks Live, but then we actually started documenting a process.
So that ties into some of the questions that you all asked earlier. How do you get started? How do you get people involved? Showing somebody this, showing them how easy it is, and then start talking about a problem area, they start mapping it out.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to a process that's a little bit more filled out to show some additional features of this. I don't want to spend my time filling out information. I'm going to go back to my space here, space, and I'm going to go to my hiring onboarding and my go-to demo. All right, so I filled out this process, and let me zoom out a little bit here. All right, so we have a much more filled out process. We've got what we call inline sub-process here. So I can actually click on it, and it shows a couple of tasks within here. I can also create a linked sub-process. So what I can do is I can come to a particular task in a process. Let me zoom in a bit. And I'll right-click, and I'll link to a process. And this might take a little bit because it's actually to workshop. All right. I'll link it to my workshop demo. So it has that little chain icon in the corner. So in this case, for an inline sub-process, I can only use it here within the process. But for this linked sub-process, I can not only use it here, but basically anywhere. What I can do is right-click on this particular task, which really denotes a process, and I can say open link to process. And it shows that process that I just created. So I can go back to the hiring onboarding process. Okay. So the third main view that is the documentation view. Right? All this information was input at some point in the processes along the way. And the nice thing is it generates this documentation for you, all the numbering. So if you add an activity and add some description or documentation, it automatically renumbers it all for you, so you don't have to go back and do it. In addition, you can want to show all the details, right? So it kind of shows you all the information that was input for this particular task, right? Who the owners are, the experts, right? All that information. And I can also export this out as a Word document. And here's some options, right? You want to include the property details, you want to include the process diagram, and I don't want to include the sub-process for the time being. So we'll click on Export. Give it a moment here. We'll save the file. Question?
Yes. I probably missed the intro of BlueWorks, and I know it's I guess a decision management tool. But what is the value proposition to someone, who's using Visio or iGraphics? I mean, what kind of features do you have? I mean, is it interactive that you have everything here that's mapped, and then you can record this? Does it do simulations? Can you enter time in and run process flows? What's the value prop?
Right. In fact, many of those things that you mentioned. When I talked about Visio earlier on, it's just a drawing tool, and a lot of times when I see these Visio diagrams, you've got a ton of information because there's really no place to put that information other than the screen itself. So you see this bird's nest of a process. So here, at least, you see the process, and then you can right-click and then look at the details of that particular activity so you can drill down. And I'll show you in a moment kind of additional features and functions such as simulation, not really simulation, but playback, and do analysis, kind of basic analysis of a process.
The category is basic process discovery and decision discovery. That's where this is used. And it gets used across a very broad spectrum. We do have quality folks, like Six Sigma folks, more on the lean side using it because they'll do Kaizen events where they get in a room and let's talk about this process and what can we do. This helps them visualize that through all the features Joe's talking about. It doesn't go to the extent of simulation. That's something that we do in the process designer that he's going to show you in a minute. But honestly, we find customers getting more value out of this level of analysis and then moving to automation.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're here for the very beginning, but you can actually import a Visio diagram. Very common that we go to a customer and say, oh yeah, I've got the process. Here it is in a Visio diagram, and you don't have to go back and re-enter it in BlueWorks Live. You can simply import it. Now, that said, and Visio being a drawing tool, obviously you can do whatever you want in a drawing tool. And it'll go into the diagram and say, well, here's a shape here, and I have no idea what you mean by this shape. And it'll give you a mapping option. Oh, this shape really means a task or a decision. It's not 100% because more often than not, you'll have to go back and do some cleanup. That's, again, it depends on how well that was drawn, how consistently that process was drawn initially. Mm-hmm. Yep. Let me show you that.
The question?
Oh, is there like basic analysis, criticality? Can you show that for? Can you show that afterwards?
Use it all in a database so you can extract it. On rare occasions, we have exported this for customers that wanted to do something interesting, but we actually expose it all for you in different ways. And the documentation is one, and Joe's going to show you the other.
Right. So what I was working initially was the edit mode. Kind of hard to see here, kind of zoomed out a bit. So right now I'm in the edit mode. There's another mode called analyze. So we're going to switch over to the analyze mode. Right, so I'm looking at this process, in terms of participants, let me zoom in a little bit here. Right. Now, obviously, this is not very exciting because you can see by the swim lane who the participants are for this particular, each of these tasks. What you can then do, right, the information that you entered in here, I can say cycle time. So you'll see the process by cycle time. Actually, I know that there are cycle times for particular activities. Taking a look at a particular process.
Maybe one of those comments was that somebody removed them on you.
Yeah. I switched over to cost. So you can actually view this process by cost, and you can sort on the cost or particular, and you can select, oh, add candidate to HR records. In this case, it's a milestone. So you begin to ask questions. Well, why does this particular phase of the process, why does it cost so much? Right? And begin to do things like that. All right. Supplier. So you can then begin to do some basic analysis of the process before you go ahead and implement.
One of the key ones, Joe, when you had the detail screen up and you went into the problem areas, those are some of the key things that we see people using in large engagements where they sit and go through kind of a joint design, joint problem discussion, where they do things like looking at the analysis page to see where are the problems, where are the severities. So when Eva talked about how do I know what to solve, right? You might have gone through this. Because it's collaborative, you have multiple people working on it offline. Right? And then you get together and you look at it and you start to see, you go into problems and you go, wait a minute, why is that a problem? Who put that in there? Well, you can look in the social feed, you can see who did it. If they're not in the room, you can blame them for being wrong. But it might be that you're going to surface things because people have time to look at it. And it's collaborative, and it's all in the same model.
So there's one other aspect I want to show before I switch. Oh, question.
Can you have multiple people working on the same flow at the same time?
Yes.
Okay, then how does the display differ from person to person when you're updating it, and how do you handle it with version control?
Well, currently, basically, what you see here is kind of the running the actual process itself. So two people who look at this process and make changes at the same time, so you're kind of competing with one another. There is another feature down here. It's kind of hard to see.
Currently online, Candy Hernandez,
Right.
Kent Malave, Michele Calante, and Amir.
Right, so if they're looking at, and you can collaborate in real time, you can actually instant message one another and talk about the process. I mean, you can actually be on the phone or something like that, but you can also do this via.
Sometimes when we have two people in the room, or Joe's asked somebody back in their home office, like, I'll be doing this at 10 o'clock. Could you? And you'll start to see the blocks move.
Right.
So your question about what do you see, you literally see they're in the same model, and the rendering of the model updates in real time. So the next question was about change control, Joe.
Right. So the change control is you can actually do revision history. Let me zoom in a bit here. Right. So I can click on here. We call it a snapshot. Call it November 7th. And you can always revert back to that snapshot at some point. You can see how it changes over time. And as you can see here, it also takes auto snapshots. Every few minutes, it takes a snapshot. Every time you make a change, it will take a snapshot. Or we call it an auto revision. So it kind of keeps track of that.
This is part of the investment we're making in ease of use and in collaboration around all of the products. Because what's the next thing that's going to happen? Somebody's going to say or ask, what did it look like?
So this is good if you're updating different activities or tasks so the other person can see it. Is there an option if you were to update the same task simultaneously? Now you understand that there's somebody else that is online at the same time because you're able to see it. If you were to both choose the same activity to update at the same time, will you be given any kind of notification that someone else is working on that specific activity at that time?
Currently not in BlueWorks Live. I can show you an example in Process Designer. What ends up happening is when you're working on a particular artifact, it will lock it out. So the person who's working on it will lock it out. We don't do that here yet because we're trying to encourage collaboration.
So I think here we call it, it's optimistic locking.
Right.
We lock it, figuring out everything's going to be okay, and he who saves last wins. Right? And there where it's more important in the process designer, because we're really building something, it's pessimistic locking, right? Let's get control of it.
Right. We're trying to encourage collaboration, because if you check out an entire project, nobody else can work on it until you release it. At least in here, everyone can work on it. I know it makes it a bit more chaotic, but the point is to get people to start using it, collaborating.
Is there a list of users? Is there a list of editors and the times that they edited?
Yes. In fact, that's what I showed initially.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. In this activity stream,
right,
it's kind of showing what I did here, and let me show the older.
Made one change. You can click on any one of those and see. This
Right. Right. It just kind of shows a stream of who did what to when in this particular space, in my space here.
Then you can click on it. I mean, everything's linked, right, hot linked right to it.
Mm-hmm.
You see how this interactive part works? Both with the workshop and with BlueWorks Live? I'm sorry? Yes,
Exactly. Exactly.
And our development is not ashamed at all in some of the things they've done. When we get into the decision manager, you're going to see the timeline, things like that. Yep.
Okay, so I want to show one more thing before we move on to process designer real quick. To your point about simulation, we don't do simulation here per se. I'll show you simulation in the process designer. We do something called playback. So we kind of run through a process and we can click on, I'll show you this in a moment. We'll call this the happy path initially because we have a decision here. We've got a yes and last one. And call this happy path. And if you were paying it, well, it was kind of hard to pay attention to the Ottawa, the hospital. They kind of showed this briefly in the video itself. And so what I'll do is I'll create another scenario called, we'll call it the sad path. So
You should call it the Sandy path.
yeah. And I go through decision, and right. So what I can then do is start playing back these different. Let me zoom out a bit so we get a little more.
You know, I joked about that, but after Katrina, the Coast Guard called us and said we couldn't change our logistics processes quick enough. Help.
So we can actually step through the process. Okay, we've documented this particular process, and okay, we've got one step here. Does everyone agree? So forth. Kind of focuses people's attention on the actual nodes of a process. You get agreement, buy-in that this is the process. And we showed the other scenario, the sad path.
Do you see how this could get some business people nodding their heads like, okay, now I understand what we do? Wait, because we're going to take this and show them more, and engage them more.
Right, and as you can see, I didn't point it out initially, but as you step through the process, not only are you stepping through the process, but you can also show all of the attributes that you added here. In this case, we added a participant and a problem. But again, more information that you put in for the attributes, the more you'll see here. You also have the ability to export a PowerPoint diagram or a PowerPoint slide deck. I've already downloaded it. Process that I created. This is the hiring onboarding process that I exported out. So it's got the discovery map. It's got the process diagram, and so forth. It has all the information that was input to this particular process. You can update the banner up top to your corporate logo, so you don't get just BlueWorks Live. Right? You can do that. All right, so let's switch over to Process Designer. Now, for you techies out there, Process Designer is kind of your more traditional Eclipse-based IDE. Right? It's software that's installed on your desktop, and it's communicating with Process Center. So you've got your developers each have this process designer on their desktop, and it's communicating with a centrally located process center. Right? So they're working within all this information here, or just process applications that are residing within Process Center. Right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a project within Process Designer, and I'm going to subscribe to a process from the cloud in BlueWorks Live. I'm going to create a new process app. Call it demo.
So I just want to be clear, because we always get the question as we go further, and it's natural. We're showing you a lot. We're really talking about capabilities for discovering what's going on in the business. How do we change the way we work and make it better? We've talked about that. Now we're talking about building a solution to fill those gaps. So we're in a different tool.
Right. So if you're familiar with Eclipse-based tooling, right, we've got our four-pane view here. We've got our canvas here. We've got our project pane here, navigation pane. We've got our attributes pane over here, and an outline over here. So what we can then do is go into BlueWorks Live and actually take that process we developed in the cloud and pull it into the designer. Now, it's not working at the moment because it's the certificate that BlueWorks Live, for whatever reason, is issuing is not being trusted, at least by my process designer. Not sure why that's happening, but not to despair. We can actually create the process here straight in Process Designer. Just to prove to you that you don't have to start BlueWorks Live. BlueWorks Live is a great place to start because it kind of allows a wide range of people to do process discovery, but you can also do process discovery here in Process Designer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create that very same process that we created, or a very similar process that we created in BlueWorks Live. Call it our demo. And I apologize for some of the screen resolution. When you're doing this projection, there's a compromise between being too big and too small. At least with a web browser, I can sort of zoom in and zoom out. All right, so when I create a process in Process Designer, I get two swim lanes. One essentially human swim lane and one system swim lane. I can always add additional swim lanes and so forth. What you're seeing here is Business Process Modeling Notation, BPMN. Again, it's that merging standard of BPM. So I can then start dragging and dropping these artifacts from my palette over to the canvas. So we'll create a very simple process, and we'll run the process. It's very important to note here, when you're building this out, you're not building out a mock-up. You're actually building the process. As I alluded to before, when we talked about kind of IBM's approach, IBM's methodology, the ability to gather requirements, build out your application, test it out all at one time. So you're not writing requirements for months and handing them over to developers, crossing your fingers and hoping that they kind of understand what you wrote, and then by the time the actual users kind of see the end result, that it hasn't changed. Because we know that once you write those requirements, guess what? That requirements document is out of date. And I've realized that. And a lot of times when I do demos in Process Designer, what I'll do is I'll get a requirements document from a customer. And it's usually a Word document, a PowerPoint, back of an envelope, right? This is what we want. They're not quite sure. It's kind of sketchy, and that's okay. So I'll build out a process application that kind of meets those requirements, and I'll play it back for them. And I'll show you playback in just a moment. Then they'll say, oh, that's great. I just thought of something else. I need this, this, and this. Okay, no problem. I'll write it down or whatever. I'll take note of it. I'll go back, or sometimes I'll do it right there. In fact, I'll make some changes right before your eyes in just a moment. So you play it back, get that feedback, instantaneous feedback, and you build out additional versions of that process. So you're building out an actual process. So you don't have that waiting around months before you see an application. You're going to see an application built in a matter of minutes. All right, so let's create a very simple process. So what I'm going to do is add in an additional swim lane here. We'll call it Manager. All right, we've got Participant. We'll call that Agent. Use Agent in our. And I'm going to have to keep the system swim lane. So what I'm going to do is drag this over. I'm going to drag some activities onto my canvas. We'll keep it simple. We'll call it Step 1. Drag another activity here. We'll call it Step 2. Finally, Step 3. And I'll wire it up quickly. And just like that, we have a running process. This process will run. You can actually take this process, deploy it after production. It doesn't do a whole lot, as you'll see in a moment. Let's play it back. We'll run the process. Now, if you're familiar with Eclipse IDEs come with perspectives, right? Different views. And right now we're in the designer perspective, and give it a moment here, it's going to switch over to the inspector perspective. Right? So we're building out the process. Next, we're going to test the process. And now we're in a different perspective. You'll see a different screen here in a moment. Yeah, well, you know it's a live demo. Let's see what we got here. All right, so looks like it's running. We'll see in a moment. All right, so you've got the process instance up here. You've got any tasks, sort of an inbox over here. You see the process with the current task haloed in yellow, and you've got some debugging panes over here. What I can then do, cross our fingers, okay, I want to run this particular task, the first task. Now, since I haven't defined who an agent is, it says these are the different people in your user registry. Who do you want to run this as? And I'll just run it as somebody. Next, you'll be asking, what are you going to see? What are you going to see next? Well, basically, since we haven't defined any data, business objects, or any screens yet, we'll do that in a moment. It's going to render a default screen. Now, in this case, when you're dealing with a very complex process, you might have a certain percentage of screens complete. So you come to a particular task in this process and say, well, we haven't done this one yet. Here's some default data, and we'll just click on done, and we'll move on to the next step in the process. All right, we'll do a refresh. Okay. I'll take a look at that. All right, so it's moved on to step number 3, because actually step number 2 is a system task. Right, since we haven't defined what the actual implementation of that is just yet, it kind of just skips it over and moves on to the 3rd step of the process. And again, we'll play it back, and again, it should just render a default screen. Done. That out. Refresh. Done. All right, so now,
So Joe, you've just shown the capability here so they understand the tool. When we're doing this, if we were to take walking through with the business people and IT and business analysts from BlueWorks Live, and then we're going to show people something better, that's where you're going now, right? We actually have the screens that look like something. Does that make sense? Right. Right now, all we've done is set a baseline for the tool.
Right. Just created a process. You can do the process discovery here as well, but you're building out you're actually building out an application here. All right. So what we'll do is we'll start defining some information, some variables, some business objects. So with the process here, you've got 3 choices: inputs, outputs, and private. So basically, if you want to accept information from the outside world, you create inputs. If you want to send information to the outside world, you create outputs. If it's totally within the scope of the process, you create private variables. In this case, we'll keep it simple. We'll add a private variable. Call it name. By default, it's a string. Add a private. We'll call it address. Private. We'll call it date. All right. Okay, so now we've defined some variables. We can also define more complex variable types. So now what we can do is we can then create services associated with these activities. So the activity wizard, and right-click on a particular task. Now it assumes that since this particular activity is in a human swim lane, that you want to use a user task. All right, so it says, okay, you want to create a user task. You can also create a system task, which we'll see in a moment. The system task, right, if you want to write some basic process level rules, you can do that here, and so forth. It notices that I've defined some variables for this process. Do I want to use these particular variables as inputs and outputs to this particular service? Sure, why not? We'll click on Finish. So what we can then do is drill into this particular task, and we're brought to a different pane. It might be a little hard to see, but The background is changed to a graph paper. So we're working in a different mode. Right? We went from the process to an activity, kind of drilled into the activity. And what you see here is a basic one screen, right? A single screen here that was generated.
One of the cool things you're going to see, if you bring up something that's already really built out, you'll see that the paradigm for stepping through a task is the same as stepping through the process. It's very easy to understand.
And you can drill into the actual screen itself, and what this wizard does, what this wizard will do, is we'll kind of just throw the information onto the screen itself. So here's a basic screen, okay? And you can play back the screen. Give it a moment. There it is. Not very exciting, but you can play back this individual screen for your end users and say, oh, do you like it? And the user's going to say, well, I really need to have a 2-column section, and name and address should be in one side, the date should be in the other. Can you make that happen? So to some people, folks were talking about taking 6 weeks. I'll show you how quick and easy it is to do here. Back design. What we'll do is we've got our palette, a section here. We'll have a horizontal section. Call this my form.
Joe, can you, when you get done with this part, can you bring up one that's done?
Sure.
Show them what it looks like so we can show the decision management, and then because I want to have you guys have some time at the end to kind of look at whatever you want to look at.
All right. So I have to drag in this vertical section along with the horizontal section because I want to have name and address on one side, and I'll drag the date to the other side.
While you're doing this, Joe, I have seen business people stand up and say, I want to do this. When we build from scratch in front of people. We just say, well, what are your requirements when we show people? Because, and here's an example of where we do that. We have a new capability built around our own in-house work. And I was at a briefing with a customer in RTP, and one of the folks that's an executive in our CTO's office was there. We're doing this with our own SAP work. We reach into SAP, we pull out the process that's defined in SAP. But in SAP, it's only a document. It's not a process, believe it or not. It's documentation. We reach in and we put it up here. And you remember I said we're going to show you something better? As you start to see walking through this. Remember, when we're walking through at BlueWorks Live, business people shook their head. You all said that, yes, they would get it. But now we start to show them screens. So we can literally reach into SAP, pull out the documentation of what's in there, the application, the process hierarchy, the transaction code, and run it here by pressing play, and it will run the screens. We do that, we run the screen. So you start to see those fields on there, right? They're SAP screens. Now you want some in between and around it, or you want us to replace those, we can do it and make it look like you want. But business people actually start saying, what if you move that? Just like Joe was doing. It's about visualizing it. That's where you get that engagement. No, it's running the SAP screen. Okay. Not a lot of magic. It's simply that we call it transaction code. We can also call transaction codes that are not. That's part of what it's about, the blueprinting, being able to visualize it. There's a lot on it, right? It goes beyond the process. But it's what Joe's showing you right here that gets people. So it goes back to what I talked about. The visualizing, the higher level.
Yeah, as George was talking, I realized that I didn't have his vertical section here, and this is kind of slightly offset. So I just went back into the tool, edited a vertical section, dropped it in there, and now it's nicely aligned. As you can see, the goal here is to minimize your coding or minimize your developer's coding, right? Because a developer could actually develop something like this, but they're going in and creating that stuff. Whereas in the tooling, you're dragging and dropping these elements onto the canvas. As you noticed, you may have noticed, since that was defined as a date type, right, it automatically has this date selector. Right? You don't have to code it; it's already there. You can also add to it. You can add a whole lot, your own library of different types of controls. You're not just stuck with what IBM has out of the box. But IBM has a wide range of controls that you can utilize.
You have the order management demo?
Yes. In fact, I'll show probably a tab section. Yep. All right, so we developed a simple process We tested it out. What I'm going to show now is kind of the end result, kind of the end user experience of working with BPM, right? Out. All right, so we've got IBM BPM is something called Process Portal. It's an out-of-the-box application that you can utilize as a front end. You're not required to use that as a front end. You can if you already have a front end. In fact, this is quite common at customers. They already have the UI framework, but they want to utilize BPM underneath the covers, and you can certainly do that via REST APIs. So BPM exposes a number of REST APIs that other applications can utilize to call BPM and gather this information. But this kind of provides out-of-the-box an out-of-the-box UI. Now, you might be asking, what's the palm tree doing in the background? I was doing some modification. You can actually customize this process portal to your needs, and I was just customizing the login screen. So what you see there. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in. Log as myself. And what I'm going to do, actually come into my inbox, right? And these are my tasks, and it looks like I've been quite lazy, and I've got a number of overdue tasks. Right? And normally, if you've got overdue, you can have overdue, at risk, and on time. But it looks like I've been not a very good employee, and I have a lot of tasks that are overdue. But I can click on a particular task, and I can begin to work on it. And as you may have noticed, on the right-hand side here, you'll see details associated with this. Let me zoom in a little bit here.
How it got pushed out in your case, in the example of creating a promotion, because we're going to automate that for you, so it's easier and not painful. I've heard 2 people today say creating a promotion is painful, not just you. So we're going to create a process. We're going to draw that process in the room with people. We're going to draw the screens, capture the data we need. We're going to do some integration systems if we need to, and then we're going to deploy that, and you're going to have a solution. Now you're going to go there and say, I want to create a promotion for this because you've kind of worked with the business and realized it, and you're going to go in and create this request for a new promotion. The review task goes to Joe. Remember the swim lanes? We have a requester lane. We have an approver lane as an example. You're the requester. Goes now an approver, but he didn't get to it, so it's on his task list plate. It's just a step in a process. It could be 16 processes that he's a participant in, and that's who built the workflows? The picture is the process. So that diagram we showed before and the screens, that is it. That's the workflow. Yeah. When we draw the process diagram, that's the workflow. When we build the screens, that's the application that we're going to go into. The task list is automatic. So already part of it. And those roles that we entered, those would be tied to your security system. For instance, if you log into Active Directory in your environment, we would leverage that, create those roles there and assign people to them. Right, because the very fact it just runs. We press play. Right, because what I did was I kicked off this process that we just created, right? And although I want to show all the details. I think I can always do another demo view. But basically, in this particular task, under assignments here, I assign basically to everybody. Initially, it defaults to everybody. So everyone's going to get it on their work queue. In fact, so if we could, you're going to click on the task and show the screen, and then if we could show my team performance. Right. So as you can see here, in the process portal, the end user, I just started that process. Remember I told you all I had was overdue tasks? I started up a process. I can start up a new process. Let me start up another one. Right. That. If I go back to my process portal and I do a refresh, in the process portal, you will see on the right side, stop for a second. He just started another task. So he started another task, and he's got a to-do. Right? That's the to-do side. On the right side are all the processes that you have the right to create. Now, it might be a purchase rec, it might be simple, it might be an expense report, it might be a request for a new promotion, right? It might be a new patient triage. Okay. Let's switch, because we're running out of time. So I really want these folks to see my process, my team performance, if we have that right. And then we'll go to the business console for the decision server.
Right. So as to briefly just kind of show you, this is the screen that we developed in the process designer. So I kicked off that process. That screen is rendered here. But I can make those assignments to different people. It'll show up on different people's work. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out as myself. I'm going to log in as a manager.
So one of the problems with the folders was we didn't know what work was late, what service level agreements. Sometimes we just care about our customers enough to create service level agreements. We will commit to you at this time. Sometimes there's regulations. We've got some insurers that are healthcare payers that are paying Medicaid claims, and they're not doing it on time. One of them actually spoke at Gartner and spoke at our Impact Conference, and he found out by mapping out the process that they knew they were getting fined. They knew they weren't paying claims on time in the 30 days. They didn't know why. Every department involved was meeting their own service level agreement. Every department, by their own measures, was on time. But the overall process end-to-end was not. They had no visibility into it, no automation. So this is what you want to see. You want to have this visibility.
Right. So as part of the process portal, we were initially in work. Now I moved over to dashboards, and I selected this. This is one of the scoreboards that you get out of the box. You get this automatically, and this information is collected automatically. And I'm gathering, I logged in as OF manager, and this particular person is managing the order management process, or order fulfillment process. And he or she can actually view this scoreboard and see which tasks are overdue, at risk, or on time. And they can also reassign those tasks to other folks or change the priority. In this case, they're all normal, but you can change that so they can show up higher in their work queue, whether they're overdue or at risk, just like I showed you with the work queue itself.
This is an area that Gartner has just included in their intelligent BPMS quadrant. It's around analytics, both active analytics and on-demand analytics. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask Joe not to show you the optimizer. That would be our on-demand analytics here, where we literally go in and do analytics on the process data. Where are the bottlenecks? Where are we doing too much rework? What do you suggest? So we have that capability. We're investing in this area. Those were active analytics, obviously. At risk is based on information that we have in the process data warehouse about how long you're taking to do these things. If it takes you a week and you've got 4 days left to do, and it's been 5 days, you're at risk. You're not late yet, but you will be. It's relatively simple, but there's more to it. We're also investing in the social aspect of it. So I talked about with the folders, I didn't know who to ask for help. We can design in at design time. You keep logging in there. Okay. He's logging into the decision center. But I just wanted to get this point out. On those screens that we showed you, we have the capability now in this version to say, at design time, we can say who the experts are. Or we also dynamically determine who's been working on this type of problem. We have that information in the process data warehouse. So you can literally, from one screen, ask for help, chat with somebody, or show them and share the screen so they can actually help you. And that's all out of the box. All the stuff we're showing you is out of the box. Mm-hmm. Joe has switched to the decision center.
So we're viewing all of the process rules or business rules that were developed. And you can view those rules, make updates, and create new rules in response to business conditions. All right, so I logged into the business console, and what we're seeing here are new business rules that were created recently. I can follow certain rules as things are changing, similar to what you saw in BlueWorks Live. You get that stream as well. So as people make changes to rules, you'll see what those changes were. Go to library. Now I can view kind of the rule sets that are currently being used. And I can hover over one. It'll show me recent activity. I can click on it, drill into it. right? And again, I get that stream of what changes were made to these particular rules and with this particular rule set. I can see the rules themselves. I can select, say, insurance.
One of the investments we're making here, one of the powerful features is the search and filter. Tongue twister for me. But this is what people are used to today. Type in I forget, car loan, something like that, or state, and find the rules about that, just like that, fast.
Right. So what you're seeing here is a notion, a decision table, one type, and I'll show you another type, what we call text or business action language. So you've got essentially a spreadsheet, right? The grade that you're going to assign a particular loan application, the amount, and you have the amount of the loan, and whether or not insurance is required, and if it's required, the insurance rate. So depending on the grade itself and the amount of loan, you're either going to say yes or no, whether or not insurance is created and the insurance rate. In addition, you can do...
One of the keys to this is that it's English. We talked about business people using this. This is the console where business people will go. Now, culturally, adoption in this area sometimes takes time. Some customers have kept this in IT for a while, and truthfully, I told you, this release, this user interface, this was this first half of this year, right? We've really focused on ease of use for business people. It wasn't this good looking before, but today we're seeing even there's a financial firm in Tennessee that I know that always kept the rules in IT, but now they're starting to roll them out. And it's made a difference. But it's an adoption thing. It's kind of a cultural thing. How do we allow the business people who have been directing IT to make the changes? How do we allow them to do it and have it in our gut, right? So there's the English part of the rule, and then there's the whole test process simulation and the governance around it.
Right. So as you can see here, right, this is more natural language. I mean, for those of you who are coders, still have the if then else, but it's more in English style. Although you can change language, you should be able to change languages. Right. So if the loan report is approved and the loan grade in the loan report is A, B, or C, then in the loan report, accept the loan with the message, congratulations, your loan has been approved, or else refuse the loan with the message, we're sorry, your loan has not been approved. And you can write these rules, or write a new rule. Zoom out a bit here.
The thing is, that's what executes.
Right.
Who writes the rules? So it can absolutely be the business person. Now, yes.
Right.
Now, IT's involved to set it up. The vocabulary that you see there is your vocabulary. As we expose a decision service that they're going to call, we're documenting what data do we need, what elements do we need in that decision service, and what are those things. One of the interesting things that I have seen with customers, if any of you remember enterprise data models, all the arguments we've had around trying to come up with common glossaries, because the end result was the glossary, the dictionary. And we argue about what we call things and what it means. However, when the end result is a rule that I can write and it's going to execute, we get past vocabulary so fast. It's amazing. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it. And the business helps us create the vocabulary. So in the system, you have this logic, if-then that Joe's showing you. You have the vocabulary that's going to click and it pulls, look, the borrower, the loan report, your vocabulary. And then, so every rule has a set of conditions. It has an action, like approve the loan or set the price to this. And it has a reason. And we carry the reason for you. We had an insurer, one of Joe's peers talks about this, and it's funny. I told you about Alex, the French guy that we have. He always jokes. But he talks about this insurer. All their code worked. But when somebody called up and said, why was I not approved? They needed a programmer to find out why. But the people, the business people, when they're writing a code, even if it starts with a regulation and a rule and goes in there, or if a business policy, they know why that action is taken, and they just specify things. And then it follows through.
All right, so as you can see, I was able to create this text-based rule, right? There's two main rules, the style of rules, text-based and table-based. And you see how easy it was. Kind of prompted you, right, the amount of the loan, because there was a vocabulary that was already there. It allows you to, oh, I'm looking for the amount of the loan. It's really, when you look underneath the covers, it's a field within a business object. But, question? That will be built as part of this rule set. And that gets deployed out, and that becomes part of those projects that you see in the business console, and that's where you can start writing those rules.
So the question was, how do you build the vocabulary? And it's where the IT folks and the business folks come together on that one. It's a step in we have a methodology for decision projects. It's part of it.
Right, because you have to marry kind of the technical business object field to English, right? So this translates into, some numeric variable in a business object. So somebody says, okay, they agree upon the vocabulary of this is the amount of the loan. The loan is the business object. The amount is a field within that business object.
So you're asking where does the metadata, where do the rules data reside? The metadata about the rules? In a repository, and it could be any database. That's just the ones that we support are typical ones. How do you build? Sure. So it's not at the database level, it's at the decision center, because the decision center is the repository for all the rules. It happens to have a database behind it, right? So the decision center, and it goes back to one of the questions over here, Sven, I think you asked about, kind of a global view, right? Whatever the geography is, there's multiple geographies within it. And we can do that, and we're working with an insurance company in Philadelphia on the same problem. Do we have one global decision center that everybody pulls from, or do we have a federated set of decision centers, or do we have separate decision centers and parts of certain rules are here and certain rules are there, right? And that's a topology discussion, an architectural discussion, more than a business discussion. Yeah. But it's absolutely a discussion you have. Yes, it could. So the comment was it could become a real constraint to the business if it's not architected the right way, so that all the business people that need to get access to the right rules. Absolutely. By the way, I want to be very respectful of your time. Really appreciate you guys coming here. I know it's been a rough month. It's about 2 minutes to noon. We'll keep going if you want to. It's up to you. Joe can show you. Joe's the guy that can show you anything.
Yeah, I could easily spend an afternoon showing BlueWorks Live, Process Designer, or a Decision Center.
Or Business Monitor.
Business Monitor, we haven't showed that either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I show a dashboard real quick?
Sure.
Questions, comments?
Come in multiple languages?
Yes, internationalization is supported. And it's new for rules. So if you write the rules in English, you can actually have them translated to French, Spanish.
German?
Yes, yes.
Give an example of instances where this may perhaps been used in integration situations. So where you may acquire a company and you have certain synergies, right, and certain processes that you map. Can you give an example of what the value proposition is for utilizing this tool?
I can give an example on the process side. A great example. I work with this company, not necessarily a great company anymore, but we've all had our ups and downs. Nortel, Northern Telecom Communications, right? Manufacture telco communication equipment. One of my peers, one of the guys I work with, was my customer there. And they used process integration software to automate their supply chain, flow orders from one system to the other. SAP was part of it, front ends, multiple front ends, multiple back ends. They acquired a company called Qterra in Florida, and in 30 days they'd integrated the financials because they had abstracted the process part of it. from a rules perspective, I would have to look from the decision management. For instance, one company like Hertz has all of their rules for pricing, promotions, loyalty in this tool, and then they acquire somebody. Now, I don't have that off the top of my head, somebody that did that, but I could tell you how it would happen. Because slowly, and this happens, people are doing this from an enterprise, within one organization, from an enterprise modernization. We are all trying to do application rationalization. IBM's done it a lot. Thousands of applications down to a few hundred. But when you rationalize applications, whether it's across companies or inside, you have to figure out that functionality, the duplicate functionality that we have, and pull it into one place and start using it from one place. Because we expose a decision service that can be called from anywhere. In the logic, now you can say, in English, the business people could say, you know what? If it's this company, I want the rule exception to be this. Or if it's this product line, because I happen to have two applications in my company that did it, right? So you can actually put the exception logic for the different companies in the rule, and then as you change the application to point to it, it's already the logic, correct? Yes. When you're entering the rules, in entering in the tool, there are absolutely flags that pop up. Not only redundancy of the rules, but gaps. Yep. All of the validation is there.
Yeah, you get a little triangle that says if there's a gap in here, you need to fix it, or you should have a look at it. What I'll show you here briefly is monitoring. We showed a little bit with the scorecard, but you're just monitoring the process itself. This is a more broad-based end-to-end type of monitoring. And this could come from a process. This could come from any application, a database or any other application. And all Monitor is doing here is collecting that information and aggregating that information. And what you're looking at here is live, real-time dashboard. So as the information comes in, this information will update. I'm not sending any data to it at the moment, but you can say, in this case, for the example here, I'm looking at average sales in Europe, and you can immediately notice there are some issues with Poland, right, from the map. Over here, it might be a little hard to see. You see an alert, sales are low in Poland, right? And I see in my KPI over here on the gauge that the arrow is in the red zone, in the poor zone. What I can also do, these components also communicate with one another, so I can click over here and show the instances of sales in Poland, right? So we can view, kind of see what's been going on in terms of sales. Might be a little hard to see, but as you can see, this is formatted correctly in euros, and so you can format the data as you see fit. You can also do some reporting. This might take a little while for it to render, but I've gathered average sales information over time. So what we're going to see once this report gets rendered, kind of the average sales in Europe over a year, broken out by month. And then what I can then do is I can drill down into each month and view the sales in Europe for a particular month by country. And then within that country, I can actually drill down to see which retailers, the average sales within that particular country, within that particular month. So you can get quite sophisticated in terms of data analysis. And it's not loading up at the moment, but question? Yep, there's a number of different protocols you can utilize, REST, JMS, MQ. So there's a number of different protocols you can get that information to monitor. Absolutely. ERP, absolutely. Oh, there it is. So I'm looking at average sales over the past year in Europe. I have it here graphically. I have it here in a grid. What I can then do is I can right-click on any particular month. And I'll drill down the month of March. And it'll refresh and show me the breakdown within March by retailer, if I have it correct. So then it'll show me what sales occurred when. Yeah, normally it's, oh, there it goes, pretty quick. All right, so a little hard to see. Maybe I can zoom in a bit. Yeah, I know. Let me see if I can zoom in here.
It's because you're getting old, not
yeah.
Belgium, Czech Republic, Denmark,
right,
Deutschland, Iceland.
So I got Latvia, and I can right-click on Latvia, and I can say I want to drill down. Right, and that should be easier to see. So I'm looking at the sales in Latvia in the month of March. And I can see there was a sale on the 18th at FNAC and a sale on the 24th at Virgin. So you get quite sophisticated in terms of how you slice and dice that data. Right. Again, there was a lot of information thrown at you. I can certainly come to your place of business and kind of delve into more details of BPM.
What we wanted to give you in this workshop format is the opportunity to kind of hear what's the state of the art in this area. These are some higher level capabilities. And I was talking to some of you offline. There are other higher level capabilities that businesses are trying to learn. Analytics. We've been doing it, segmenting customers. We're getting better at it. Analytics plus decision management, operational decisions, right, rather than predictive, tying those together. So we can guess, we can detect, make decisions, we can act with the process. There's other ones. So we have to get up to speed. Remember the 6 to 240 problem. We have to get up to speed on solving problems quicker, pushing off that self-service to the business as best as we can appropriately with governance. Because in 24 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, we're going to have to all be using this stuff and doing whatever's next. I mean, that's really what it's about. It's really about us making our companies stay in business so that we have a job and we can put our kids through college and retire. I joke about that, but honestly, right? And we all have decisions to make about what are the starting points, where would this make sense. Hopefully we've given you something about that. Hopefully you've gotten out of it with the interaction a little more. Anything, I mean, Joe and I are here. Any other questions? Anything else you want to see? Anything else you want to ask? You want to go have lunch? You want to go? Sven, yes. Right.
Make them available to the right user in-house.
For the BlueWorks Live, so one of the challenge you mentioned is documenting a process that's not automated and getting that process definition, a current process definition, to the right people. BlueWorks Live is what we call evergreen. So one of the things we see is with Visio, people putting it in SharePoint. First of all, Visio is not 9 times out of 10 it's not a process. It's a great diagram, great tool for communication, but there are gaps in what do you do next. Second thing we see often is people go to the SharePoint, get the Visio, and keep that on their hard drive, and so it's not the current version. And that's a problem that we see often. When you have viewers into BlueWorks Live, we have customers doing this right now. Linked to the process from whatever they're working on, they can see what should I be doing, all the documentation is there. That would be the solution for that. We have customers doing that. In fact, you want to have about 10 times the processing in BlueWorks Live than you do in projects. Because what you're doing is you're developing a process culture. You look at, a lot of the writing on bpmi.org, a lot of the documents that are written out there about how do you grow into a process culture. You look at Hammer and Compass and the things they do. Any people out there writing about maturity, process maturity, they talk about growing that culture. First step is finding a process owner. Who owns the decisions in that area? Who owns the process? Who gets paid for it? Right? Identify them, get them involved. That's what BlueWorks talks about. Hopefully we've shown you how to discover these things, how to figure out where the problems are, what entry points are typical, talk through some of the examples, shown you some real customers talking about it. How do you discover it? How do you redesign? How do you get that level of engagement? Where does the self-service come from? All the things I talked about at the beginning. Right. Anything else? You don't need my permission. You can ask, you can go, you can stay. Question? Yes, sir. I have a microphone. I'll repeat it.
I assume there is online demo. Can I?
Yes. Thank you. Yes, great question. Are there online demos? 2 places. Number 1, first of all, we talk about BlueWorks Live. I want you to try it. Joe's taking money out, so you can try it. No, go to blueworkslive.com and sign up for a trial. 30-day trial. All right? Joe's offering to help anybody that wants that kind of help on blueworkslive.com. All the tutorials you need. How to use BlueWorks Live, how to use BPMN, a whole bunch of tutorials. On YouTube, there's also all sorts of videos. Short snippets about decision management, IBM Decision Management, IBM BPM, BlueWorks Live, customer stories like Ottawa Hospital. If you want to show that to somebody. MasterCard, if you want to, so the folks from MasterCard laugh. But if they didn't know the guy, so I thought maybe they'd want to do it. And this session will be on the BPM Institute, and you'll probably get a link, right? You'll all get a link to this session, which was recorded. Right? So there's all sorts of help out there. Yes, ma'am. Access to the PowerPoints on BPMI. Yes. And a certificate of attendance. Not only that, but you fill out the evaluation form and a free e-learning module filling that out. So the typical steps we see people taking is, start using BlueWorks Live. Start socializing, find a problem. One of the questions that came up, everybody nodded their head and I didn't offer a solution, is how do you then sell that? How do you then get people to understand it? Using BlueWorks Live is a way that you can start capturing the information you need for that business case. Socialize that with them. The discovery workshop, something to move forward. There's a new way of, don't say BPM. Don't say rules, don't say decision management. Those are technical buzzwords. Say, I understand this problem, big problem for our company, our customers, what have you, and there's a way to solve this that I've been exposed to that I want to explore, a better way of doing this stuff. Open the door. You're making a proposal. You're making a business proposal to people. We have a business problem, a business opportunity, and I have a solution. That's the way to go forward with it. Does that make sense? Discovery workshop is where we'll come in and work with you, bring our services folks in. We'll do that make sure we prep up front. Joe and I would come in, and we'll work with you to say, is this the right problem? How would we solve this problem? What would it look like? Who on your team needs to be involved in it? Are they aware of it? All right, here's what you have to do to get them. We'll help you do that. And then finally, that quick win project. Start with that project. Make sure it can get stood up, production ready, so that it will be successful, and you get experience that way and move forward. If you see that this is going to work. That's the flow. It's not rocket science, but it's close. Anybody ever see some of the first Mercury capsules? Talk about rocket science, right? 4K memory wired together, iron cores. Scary. Better. Anyway, what else can we tell you? Thanks for coming. Thank you very much.